So, looking back at this point in time, has your vision of your art and being an artist changed?
Well, when I was very young, my art form was ballet. I started ballet classes when I was very, very young, and I loved dancing. Only as I got into my later teens, certainly by 14, I realized that I do not have the body of a dancer. You need really long legs to be a professional dancer, especially ballerina. And I grew up just outside of New York City, in Pleasantville, New York. And I went into the city quite a bit, both to museums and to theater and to ballet. And it was all sort of connecting that I didn't have the body. And there were other girls in my class who did have those long legs. And I thought I was certainly as good a dancer of them, and often sometimes better, but it didn't matter because you needed a certain body type to get any place in that profession. So slowly coming to that realization, and at some point when I was 17, I had mononucleosis, and which meant a lot of bed rest, and I had to, and I should also mention that on my father's side, they're artists, and my grandfather, who I unfortunately never met, was a wonderful painter, and was originally from New York, and also when he married became more of a commercial artist. My father was worked in New York in the theater. He was a set designer, and that's where his office was, and so I was, so being an artist wasn't considered an unusual thing to be. And so my father, when I was sick and needed entertainment, and he bought me a little, and I guess I should say before that I liked to draw. But it wasn't like a passion. It was, I did a little painting, and I think I've taken a couple of painting classes, but it never really grabbed me. But then when my father bought me this little armature and some self-hardening clay, I made a dancing harlequin, and I fell in love with sculpture. There was something about the plasticity of just holding it, of just the feel of it, and it was so responsive. It's just incredibly responsive clay, and I really loved it. And because I had been unwell, I was allowed to go, and I turned out I really liked doing this little sculpture. I went into the New York City in the Village, 31 West 11th Street, between 5th and 6th Avenue, really nice address, with a family friend, and I took classes with Jose de Kraft at the Art Students League in I think it's 57th Street. I'm a little shaky there, but yeah. So that was wild, and here I am. So I'll be turning 18 soon, but I was still 17, and I went to the Art Students League, and I was first told never to go upstairs to the lounge or something, and here I am, from a very innocent kind of person, and here were these fabulous zany artists all over the place, and naked people, and it was just not what my high school had been like. And then I met Jose de Kraft, and I went, and I always, so I said, Mr. de Kraft, what should I bring? I thought I needed special tools and everything. And he said, bring a knife and a fork. And okay. And so for me, for a long time, that's sort of been like a koan. What does that really mean? I just think it meant your tools weren't important. What was important was what you bring to it, and you bring yourself. And Jose de Kraft mostly did stone carving, mostly in alabaster, gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. But his favorite piece was the Alice in Wonderland sculpture. And it was a sculpture, it was cast in bronze, and it was and he loved that sculpture. And it was more realistic than what he usually does, too. But he loved that sculpture because the children loved it. And there were a lot of mushrooms, and Alice was there, and the March hare, and caterpillar, and so kids were always climbing all over it, and because of that, he loved it, you know. And so I met him when he was a very elderly fellow, and he was a very tiny man, very thin, and he was wonderful. And I remember him telling me, you need to take care of the other body more than the face. I tend to be very drawn to faces, and I really put a lot of, I don't know, I'm just interested in people's faces, but he was always reminding me to take care and put detail in the rest of the body too, because that's what we were doing. And so that was my first experience, you know, time. And I went to another little art school, which was more formal at one time, at a friend's, thinking that would be good for me. I don't think it was particularly good for me, and it certainly was not as much fun. And then my mother was concerned I wasn't going to an accredited school, so I took the exam to get into Cooper Union and actually got in. And I keep thinking maybe because my grandfather, William Chesterfield Ostrander, the artist, had also taught there. I didn't know if it was a little in for me, I don't know. Anyhow, when I got there, it was the 60s, and it was all about conceptual artwork. And I think because of my dancing love and my experience, I'm just wedded to the figure. I just love the human body. And and particularly faces. So this didn't fit in with the conceptual artwork, and I soon grew weary of that. And then I had married, and then I had a little baby girl, and it was a good reason not to go to school there anymore. And shortly after that, or a few years, my husband and I and our daughter Louisa, we met people who had been coming up to this area, and we came up for a couple of summers and then bought a house in Robbinston. So that's how I ended up in Maine, and I came here, and having that as the art experience. Somewhere along the line, I also took some ceramic classes, and it was just basically on the wheel and doing that, and I'm not a potter either, and so, but I certainly liked the clay. It was wonderful working with the clay. So then once we came up here, there were a lot of people, and we did the back to the land thing, and it was, you know, we were just hippie back to the landers and living that life, and then we had another child, and so life went on until things were not feeling so great, and I ended up moving to Eastport by myself. And I also, at that time, didn't quite know what to do with myself, and I had enrolled in I had never lived by myself before, and I took a class at the university in Machias, and I didn't know where I was. I actually took a general art course because I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I was trying to find myself, as they say. So I did painting. I went on and I did eventually get a degree. I ended up going to Portland for a while, and I got a degree from there. But I still did a lot of painting, and I stayed away from sculpture class because they weren't doing the kind of sculpture that I was particularly interested in, which was figurative and, you know, and faces, and mostly women, and more or less mythological and sort of fantasy, very much like ballet.
Is
So
that where that...
I think there is. Although when I first came here, there's a lot of, I have a very old painting I can show you, but it's not what I do now. But
Does that explain a little bit of what you were interested in terms of mythology?
no.
So where did that mythology come from?
I think, well, again, I think the ballet, if you go to ballets, they're extraordinarily romantic. They're very fanciful. It's an interesting thing. And growing up, studying ballet, you are still from the waist down and chiffon from the waist up. And so you were encompassing these two different ways of being. And some of my earlier pieces, I think they're more like people you'd find in storybooks and ballets, and a lot of women. Ballet is primarily women. They tell these fantasy stories. They're often tragic, but also beautiful. And so I like that. At some point, I also became very interested in women's gatherings and women getting together and having sort of more earth-centered religious, lot of elemental aspects, a lot about, I think, women just gathering and just trying to find ways of being, and those were times of women looking to discover who they were and what their capabilities were, and so there are a lot of women's circles, a lot of women's talk, a lot of more formalized with making circles and meeting together. I think it was really a big support group for women. So I think my women often have those aspects of all of my journey of being a woman and just trying to find out what the identity was and who were you and who could you be when you had the counsel and conversation of other women who were also trying to figure that out and no longer accepting identities that we had thought were what was expected of us. And so it was really good to be with other women and hear their stories. And the men that I make, they're the nurturers. I like the green man. I also like the woodland nymph. And so they're more playful, fun. They're not, they're gentle, that gentle, nurturing aspect of men. And that's what those are the women or the men that I put into sculptures.
So tell me about your mermaids.
My mermaids. I also do frogs. When I was growing up, my bedtime stories from my father was about a frog. And it was a frog that lived in a neighbor's pool. And he had a magic little hole that he could go to in the bottom of the pool, and he could swim any place into any sea, and it was all connected. So he would tell me stories about frogs. So, and I think he told me that because I used to catch the little frogs that were in there and take them back and put them in my dollhouse. I can still remember a frog sitting there in a little toy high chair. But I would always, they get very docile after a while, and then you put them back, and then they realize they're back in their little pond, and they swim away. And undoubtedly have returned at some point to have this odd experience in a dollhouse. But then my mother told me about two princesses. One was a mermaid princess and who lives in the water, and one was a land princess. And somehow they got together and they had adventures together. I can't remember how they negotiated the mermaid's tail and lack of legs, but let's see seems to not. I can't remember, but but anyhow, I know they would go and have these adventures and showed each other adventures. So I was always very fond of mermaids, and from that experience, and I like the idea of a dual creature, that we're not just one thing. For the most part, they're kind of fantasy mermaids. They're mermaids of soul. They seem perhaps too delicate to really exist out in the cold, cold waters here, right here in the bay in Eastport. But and I have done another mermaid, which was very different, and trying to say, well, who would that being be if she really had to make her livelihood out into the ocean? You probably wouldn't quite look like that mermaid. You'd have to have magic, be surrounded by magic to live in that. But so I made her. She's a little much more wary. She's has just a different kind of gal. But I love that mermaid concept, and as many do. That's a spirit. They're like a spirit, and so it seems important. I think it's one of my main go-to places. I like making them. I think it's good to have them around, and I know they are meaningful to a lot of women. So yeah, and I just I guess to have a nice tail and be able to navigate through the water is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And but they certainly represent, I think, to women about possibilities you may never have thought you could do, but you can. And so I like that. I like
certain
that
kind of freedom within the dimension of water too.
Yes, I think there's a lot of freedom that we see there, and maybe that's what women are longing for, that kind of ease of being and of being yourself, and just have it feel wonderful, and that you're very capable. Idea. The other, and they're one of the winged ones. I do a lot of birds, and it's again sort of a mythical being, an exceptional being, and that can go into two worlds. So you have the mermaid as the land water creature, and the birds and the angels and the winged ones are, they're comfortable both on land and in the air. So they have this this other dimension to their life, and I think we all would love to be able to fly. So just again, maybe it does go back to that sense of freedom. It's giving you more powers than you have as a grounded terrestrial, and you can, it's a different way of navigating the world and understanding the world and experiencing the world. So.
Tell me about your meditation figures.
Right. I've been interested in meditation. I was in high school when I bought my first book on meditation, and I think maybe I've been talking about my sculptures inhabiting different worlds. I think I wanted to inhabit different worlds. I think we want that experience. And so meditation is a way of experience other worlds, basically worlds inside of yourself, feeling your own center, feeling your own life, deep within yourself, and it's not beholden on your environment. You inhabit your internal being. And I've been interested in meditation, and I've done various kinds of meditations myself, off and on, all these different ways. Recently, starting with the upset going on in the world, the difficulties, and especially now, it started last year, I guess in 2019, I had a show at the Gallery, and it was on meditation, and I felt a calling to do those pieces. The meditation now is that image of that sort of triangulated person sitting there is truly become a a recognizable icon. We all get it now. It's my way of trying to deal with the difficulties that life is presenting us with. They're just trying to. I used to say when I started, I feel like I'm flying out of myself. Like everything was happening, and I was responding to it, and it was disturbing. And it was very important to be able to center and to center myself. And I think, and I don't think I was alone. And so when I did that meditation show in the gallery, and then I had an artist talk, and basically talking about that and saying, why I felt the need for it. And then we had an open talk, and it was amazing how many people were feeling that way too. And there's a tremendous amount. The way I make my meditation figures as I put a lap on them, and so that sort of becomes their own altar. So you can honor yourself, and when you find the special stone on the beach, or a shell, or you want to decorate them as for a holiday, you can do that, and you can arrange little personal spaces for those pieces and for things that are particularly meaningful to you. And probably the best part about it is that you get to arrange. And I think we get tremendous comfort from arranging things. And you get to decide in this little space. It's almost like a canvas. You have a canvas, and this is the space you get to. It's not all here. It's not here. It's right here. And in this space, you can put your paint and your brush strokes where you find them needed. And when you're arranging, and this is true for sculpture, only it's the 3D, it's the physical, you arrange things. And it's the very act of arranging and of considering. And how does that make me feel when I put it here? And when I think that's what we need. We need this little place. And even if you don't do a formal meditation, if you don't do a formal acknowledge it, just as you're walking by it, it's just a little reminder. Breathe, honor yourself, go, check in with your insides, the center of yourself inside. And so that seems really important today, because I think a lot of people are feeling like they're flying out of themselves.